By the time she walked out of the hearing room, her career was over. She just didn't know it yet. The hearing room was too hot. 300 people crammed into a space built for half that number. Bodies pressed against walls 3 deep. Reporters standing on tiptoes trying to see over shoulders. Young staffers squatting in corners, notebooks balanced on their knees. The air conditioning wheezed and groaned, fighting a losing battle against all the human heat. You could hear it. The mechanical hum of the struggling ventilation system. The rustle of programs being used as makeshift fans. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered. The low murmur of anticipation that fills a room when everyone knows something important is about to happen. It was late spring in Washington. Outside, the temperature had already hit 85 degrees by 9 in the morning. Inside, with 300 warm bodies generating heat, it felt closer to 90. People loosened collars. Dabbed foreheads with tissues. The humidity made everything feel sticky, uncomfortable, tense. This was supposed to be routine. Just another hearing on immigration policy and border security. The kind of thing C-SPAN broadcasts and nobody watches except policy wonks and insomniacs. But the room told a different story. The crowd said otherwise. The energy crackling through the space said otherwise. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat at the curved committee dais, perfectly still. 73 years old, his hair white, his suit dark blue and perfectly pressed. Reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. A thick manila folder rested on the table in front of him, noticeably thicker than the folders other senators had brought. He wasn't taking notes. Wasn't fidgeting with his pen or checking his phone like some of the younger senators. Just sitting there, listening, his hands folded neatly on the table in front of him. If he didn't know better, he'd think he was half asleep. Maybe even bored. But his staff knew. The young aide sitting behind him knew. When Kennedy got this quiet, this still, this focused, something was about to happen. He was like a cat watching a mouse hole. Patient. Waiting. Ready. At the witness table 15 feet away, Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota adjusted her microphone. The feedback squealed briefly, that sharp electronic whine that makes everyone in a room wince simultaneously, before the sound technician corrected it and it settled into silence. Omar cleared her throat. Smoothed her notes with one hand. Took a visible breath, her shoulders rising and falling. Then she began speaking. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of this committee, thank you for inviting me here today. Her voice was strong. Confident. Clear. She practiced this speech. Rehearsed it with her communications team. Tested different emphases, different pauses, different emotional beats. I come before you not just as a member of Congress, but as someone who lived the immigrant experience personally. I was a refugee from Somalia. I spent years in a refugee camp in Kenya. I came to America as a child with nothing but hope in my heart. And America gave me everything. She paused. A practiced pause. You could hear it in the silence, the calculated weight of it. But today, Mr. Chairman, that American dream is under attack. We've seen families separated at the border. Children, babies, toddlers, ripped from their parents' arms and put in cages. Muslim bans that targeted people based solely on their faith. Detention centers that can only be described as concentration camps. And rhetoric from the highest levels of government that demonizes immigrants and refugees as criminals, as invaders, as somehow less than human. Her voice rose slightly, passion building in carefully controlled increments. This isn't who we are as Americans. This isn't what we stand for. We're a nation of immigrants. A nation built by people from every corner of the world who came here seeking freedom, seeking opportunity, seeking safety. We must do better. We must be better. We must remember that when we close our doors to refugees, people just like my family was, we betray everything this country stands for. We betray the words on the Statue of Liberty. We betray our founding principles. Applause erupted from the Democratic side of the room. Hands clapping. A few people stood up. The chairman, a Republican senator from Texas, brought down his gavel, crack, 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 the sharp wooden sound trying to restore order. Order. We'll have order, please. Omar sat back down in her chair, a small satisfied smile on her face. Her phone screen, face down on the table in front of her, glowed with incoming notifications. Her social media team was already working. Twitter was already clipping her speech. This was going exactly as planned. The chairman cleared his throat. We'll now move to questions from committee members. Each member will have 5 minutes. Senator Kennedy, you're recognized. Kennedy looked up slowly from his papers. He removed his reading glasses with deliberate care. Folded them. Set them down gently on top of his folder. When he spoke, his voice was warm. Friendly. That thick Louisiana drawl like honey being poured slow from a jar. Well now, thank you Mr. Chairman. And Congresswoman Omar, that was mighty moving. Real passionate. I genuinely appreciate you making the long trip all the way from Minnesota to share your perspective with us here today. He smiled. The kind of smile that could mean anything. The kind of smile that never quite reaches the eyes. I got just a few questions, if you don't mind. Just trying to understand some things. Just a curious old country lawyer trying to learn. Omar nodded, still confident. Of course, Senator. I'm happy to answer your questions. She thought this would be easy. She'd been questioned by Republicans before. Lots of times. She had answers ready. Talking points memorized. Defenses prepared. She was very, very wrong. Kennedy picked up a single sheet of paper from his folder. Just one page. He held it delicately between his thumb and forefinger, like it might tear if he gripped it too hard. Congresswoman, you talk about corruption quite a bit in your public statements. Politicians who enrich themselves. Public servants who use their office for personal gain. The wealthy and powerful taking advantage of the system. His voice remained conversational, genuinely curious. I admire that, actually. We need more folks in Congress willing to call that kind of thing out when they see it. Omar nodded firmly. Yes, Senator. Corruption is one of the greatest threats to our democracy. Kennedy made a small sound of agreement in the back of his throat. I couldn't agree more. So help me understand something, if you would. Because I'm trying to learn here. He looked at the paper in his hand, squinting slightly, then back up at her. Your husband, his name is Tim Minot, is that correct? A flicker crossed Omar's face. Brief, but it was there. A tightening around her eyes. Yes, that's correct. And Mr. Minot, he runs a consulting company, doesn't he? Called E Street Group? Yes. And your campaign committee, your official campaign for Congress, you hire them for various services? Digital strategy, media production, travel coordination, that sort of thing? Omar's voice took on a slightly defensive edge. Yes, Senator. It's all properly disclosed with the Federal Election Commission. Everything is legal and above board. Oh, I'm sure it is. Kennedy's voice stayed friendly, almost soothing. I'm absolutely sure it's all legal, Congresswoman. I'm not questioning the legality of it. Not at all. I'm just curious about the math, is all. Because sometimes numbers confuse me. He paused. Let the silence stretch for 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 7. According to Federal Election Commission filings, those are public records, anyone can look them up online. Your campaign committee has paid the E Street Group a total of $3 million. Maybe a little more, actually, but we'll round down to keep it simple. He said the number slowly. Deliberately. Emphasis on each syllable. $3 million. The room went quiet. You could hear it, the sudden absence of ambient sound. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause mid-cycle. Now, I've run a few campaigns myself over the years. Been in politics since 1988. So I know what things cost. And the average House of Representatives campaign, your typical member running for re-election, they spend about $2 million total. For everything. Staff salaries, office rent, travel expenses, advertising, consultants, the whole operation. About $2 million for an entire 2-year election cycle. Kennedy's drawl was getting thicker. The words came out slower, more deliberate. But you, Congresswoman, you spent $3 million just on your husband's consulting firm. That's 1.5 times what most members of Congress spend on their entire campaign operation. And all that money went into a company co-owned by your husband. Which means it went into your family. Your household income. He tilted his head slightly, like he was genuinely puzzled by a difficult math problem. So help me understand how that's not enriching your family. Because from where I'm sitting, that looks like a lot of campaign money donated by regular folks who believed in your message, who trusted you, who wanted to support your political career, flowing directly into your household. Into your family business. Omar's hands gripped the edge of the witness table. Senator, these are entirely legitimate consulting services rendered to the campaign. E Street provides digital strategy, media buying, travel logistics, compliance monitoring, opposition research. I'm sure they do, Kennedy interrupted gently, never raising his voice. I'm sure Mr. Minot does real fine work. I'm sure he's talented at what he does. But Congresswoman, you stood at that witness table just a few minutes ago and you lectured this committee about corruption in politics. About politicians who use their office to benefit themselves and their families. About public servants who enrich themselves at taxpayer expense. The pause this time was longer. 10 seconds. 12. And you paid your husband's company $3 million in campaign funds. Money from people who believed in you. Who trusted you. Who thought that $20 donations were going to elect someone who would fight corruption. And it went straight into your family business. Into your household. He set the paper down very gently on the table, smoothing it with one hand. Now, I'm not a philosopher, Congresswoman. Never claimed to be. But that looks an awful lot like the very thing you came here to lecture us about. Using political office to enrich your family. Taking advantage of your position for personal financial gain. Kennedy's voice got just a touch harder, though the drawl remained. Or is corruption only wrong when Republicans do it? Is that the rule? Because I want to make sure I understand the standard we're applying here. Before Omar could formulate a response, before she could launch into a prepared defense, Kennedy was already reaching for another document from his folder. A thicker one this time. Speaking of your family situation, Congresswoman, let's talk about your previous husbands. If you don't mind. Just bear with me for a moment, if you would. Kennedy's voice remained patient. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. And since you've made your personal story such a central part of your public identity, I think it's fair to ask some questions about it. You understand? He consulted his papers, moving slowly, deliberately. According to public records and their own statements, you married a man named Ahmed Hirsi in 2002. Is that accurate? Yes. Omar's voice was clipped. And this was what you've called a faith-based marriage. Recognized by your religious community but not a legal marriage registered with the state of Minnesota? That's correct. Then in 2008, you and Mr. Hirsi separated. Had what you've described as a faith-based divorce. Again, recognized by your faith community but not a legal divorce registered with the state. Yes. Kennedy was reading from official documents now, his voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting legal records. Then in 2009, 1 year after your faith-based divorce from Mr. Hirsi, you entered into a legal marriage with a different man. Ahmed Nursaid Elmi. State of Minnesota issued a marriage license. Official legal marriage. Is that correct? Senator, I really don't think. Please just answer the question, Congresswoman. Did you legally marry Ahmed Nursaid Elmi in 2009? A pause. Then, reluctantly, yes. And you were made legally married to Mr. Elmi for 8 years. From 2009 to 2017. Correct? Yes, that's correct. Then in 2017, you legally divorced Mr. Elmi. And just a few months later, in 2018, you legally married Mr. Hirsi for a second time. Your first husband, the one you'd had the faith-based marriage with back in 2002. You married him again, legally this time. Kennedy set down his papers and looked directly at her. That's quite a complicated marital history, Congresswoman. 3 different marriages to 2 different men, with divorces and remarriages in between. Now, I wouldn't normally care about any of this. People's romantic lives are their own business. But there's been some questions raised. Questions from journalists. Questions from Minnesota state officials. Questions from people in your own community. Questions you've consistently refused to answer. He pulled out several more documents. These looked official: state seals, government letterheads. Public records from the Minnesota Secretary of State's office. From the University of Minnesota Registrar. From North Dakota State University. From the Minneapolis Property Records Department. These are all public documents, Congresswoman. Nothing secret. Nothing obtained improperly. Just regular public records that any citizen can request. His voice got slower, more deliberate, as he read from the documents. These records show that Ahmed Nurset Elmi, your legal husband from 2009 to 2017, attended the University of Minnesota at the same time you did. Same semester. Same year. He lived at the same address as you. Not just one address either. Multiple addresses over several years. Utility bills showing both names. Property documents with both names on the lease. Kennedy looked up from the papers. In fact, Congresswoman, these records show that during the entire time you were legally married to Mr. Elmi, he was living with you at the same address. Which would be perfectly normal for a married couple, except for one thing. He pulled out another set of documents. During some of those same years, specifically 2014 and 2015, you filed joint tax returns with Ahmed Hersey. Not with Elmi, you illegal husband. With Hersey, the man you divorced in your faith tradition but weren't legally married to. Two different men. One you're legally married to and living with. Another you're filing taxes with. The room was completely silent now except for the sound of pens scratching on paper. Reporters writing frantically. And then there's the question that's been raised by multiple news organizations, Congresswoman. The question you've been asked repeatedly by journalists at the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, by Minnesota state election officials, by members of your own party who are concerned about these irregularities. Kennedy's voice got quieter, which somehow made it more intense. What exactly is Ahmed Nurset Elmi's relationship to you? Because there's been speculation, based on these public records, based on statements from people who knew you both, based on immigration records that have been partially released, there's been speculation that Mr. Elmi might be related to you. More closely related than a husband typically would be. A brother, perhaps. Or some other family member. Omar's face went red. Her voice shook with barely controlled anger. This is a disgusting, racist conspiracy theory. This is Islamophobic garbage that has been thoroughly debunked by fact-checkers. Then debunk it yourself, Kennedy said simply, his voice remaining calm and level. Release your complete immigration records. Release Mr. Elmi's immigration records. Release your full tax returns from those years. Release the marriage license application where you both filled out information about their backgrounds and families. Release the documents that would prove all of this is just a misunderstanding. Clear it up once and for all. I'm not going to dignify these conspiracy theories by. See, that's what troubles me, Congresswoman. Kennedy leaned forward slightly, his hands still folded on the table. When someone accuses you of something false and you have documents that would prove them completely wrong, most people just release the documents. That's what innocent people do. They clear their names. They show the evidence. They prove the accusations are baseless. His southern drawl got thicker. But you won't do that. You've been asked dozens of times. Hundreds of times, probably. By journalists. By state officials. By concerned citizens. By members of your own political party. And every single time, you refuse. You call the questions racist. You call them Islamophobic. You play the victim. But you never release the documents. Kennedy's voice was gentle now, almost kind, which somehow made it more devastating. So I'm going to ask you here, right now, in front of all these cameras and all these people and all of America watching. Why won't you release those documents, Congresswoman? What are you hiding? The silence that followed felt like it lasted for hours. In reality, it was maybe 20 seconds. But it felt eternal. Finally, Omar spoke, her voice barely under control. I have nothing more to say about this matter. Kennedy nodded slowly, unsurprised. Noted. I'll take that as you exercising your Fifth Amendment right not to answer questions that might incriminate you. That's your legal right, Congresswoman. I respect that. He picked up his next set of documents. But I think the American people listening to this hearing can draw their own conclusions about why someone would refuse to release documents that would supposedly prove their innocence. Let's move on. Let's talk about your taxes. Kennedy pulled out an official-looking document with a state seal at the top. The paper was crisp, formal, clearly an official government report. You could hear it as he set it on the table, that particular sound of heavy bond paper. This is from the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board. Government agency. Official investigation. Public report available on their website for anyone to read. He adjusted his glasses and began reading, his voice taking on the formal cadence of someone reading legal text aloud. Quote, the board finds that Representative Ilhan Omar filed joint federal tax returns with Ahmed Abdissel and Hersey for the tax years 2014 and 2015. However, Representative Omar was legally married to Ahmed Nurset Elmi during these tax years, having entered into a legal marriage with Mr. Elmi in 2009 and not obtaining a legal divorce until 2017. End quote. Kennedy looked up from the document. Is that accurate, Congresswoman? Did you file joint federal tax returns with Mr. Hersey in 2014 and 2015? Omar's voice was tight, defensive. Yes, but we considered ourselves married in our faith tradition. But not under Minnesota state law, Kennedy interrupted, his voice still calm but firm. Under Minnesota law, and under federal law, you were legally married to Ahmed Elmi during those years. From 2009 all the way to 2017. That's what the marriage certificate says. That's what your divorce decree says. That's what the public record shows. He set down the first document and picked up another page from the same report. The law is pretty clear on this, Congresswoman. When you file a joint tax return, you're declaring to the IRS that you're legally married to that person. You're claiming the tax benefits that come with being married. Lower rates. Higher deductions. All sorts of financial advantages. Kennedy's voice hardened just slightly. But you filed joint returns with someone you weren't legally married to, Mr. Hersey, while being legally married to someone else, Mr. Elmi. That's tax fraud, Congresswoman. That's a federal crime. It's a felony, actually. Carries up to 5 years in prison. The Campaign Finance Board already handled this matter. Oh, they handled it all right. Let me read what else they found. Kennedy picked up another section of the report, flipping to a marked page. Quote, the board finds that the Omar committee used campaign funds totaling approximately $1,500 to pay legal fees related to Ms. Omar's personal tax matters and immigration issues. This constitutes an improper use of campaign funds for personal expenses in violation of Minnesota statutes. The board orders Representative Omar to reimburse her campaign committee for these expenses and imposes a civil penalty of $3,500. End quote. He set the report down carefully, aligning it with the other papers on his desk. So let me make sure I understand the sequence of events here, Congresswoman. You committed tax fraud by filing joint returns with someone you weren't legally married to. The state of Minnesota investigated. They found you guilty. And then, this is the really interesting part, you used campaign funds, money donated by your supporters who believed in you, to pay your personal legal bills defending yourself against those tax fraud charges. The room was silent except for the scratching of pens on paper. Reporters writing furiously, trying to capture every word. The board found that improper too. Ordered you to pay it back. Fined you $3,500 on top of that. And according to their report, you did eventually pay. After you got caught, Kennedy leaned back in his chair slightly. But here's what really gets me, Congresswoman. The report also notes that you didn't properly disclose these legal expenses on your campaign finance reports. You buried them. Put them in general expense categories. Legal and compliance was some such vague description. You didn't want people to know you were using campaign money to pay personal legal bills related to your tax fraud. His voice took on that particular southern quality, the words soft and polite but cutting deep. That's not just a mistake, is it? That's not an oversight or an accounting error. That's deliberate. That's hiding your misconduct from the voters who trusted you. From the donors who gave you money. From the people who believed you were different, believed you would fight corruption instead of engaging in it. Omar tried to respond. Senator, you're taking this completely out of context. I'm reading from an official state government report, Congresswoman. The findings of a formal investigation by the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board. These are my words. These are my opinions. These are the official conclusions of the regulatory agency tasked with investigating campaign finance violations. Kennedy picked up all the pages of the report and held them up. 37 pages. Detailed investigation. Multiple violations found. You paid the fine. You paid back the campaign. But paying a fine doesn't change what you did. He set the report back down with a soft thud. You committed tax fraud. Federal crime. You used campaign money to cover it up. Another violation. You hid it from your disclosure reports. Another violation. And when you got caught, you paid up and hoped everyone would forget about it. Kennedy's voice got quieter, more intense. But I haven't forgotten, Congresswoman. And I don't think the American people should forget either. Because about 20 minutes ago, you stood at that witness table and you lectured this committee about integrity. About accountability. About politicians who don't follow the rules. About the wealthy who don't pay their fair share. About corruption in government. He paused, let it sink in. But you're the one who cheated on your taxes. You're the one who filed fraudulent returns. You're the one who stole from the American people by not paying the taxes you legally owed. And when you got caught, you used other people's money, campaign donations, to pay your lawyers. Then you hid that from disclosure reports. His drawl got thicker, slower. You want to talk about corruption, Congresswoman? Let's talk about your corruption. You want to talk about people not paying what they owe? Let's talk about your tax fraud. You want to talk about wealthy elites gaming the system? Let's talk about how you used campaign funds, money from working people, to pay your personal legal bills. The silence was crushing. And the worst part? You stood here today acting like you're some kind of moral authority. Like you have the right to lecture anyone about ethics or integrity or serving the public good. Kennedy's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Shame on you, Congresswoman. The words hum in the air like smoke. Heavy. Inescapable. He picked up his next document before she could respond. Now let's talk about September 11th, 2001. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. This was the moment everyone had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The one topic that had generated death threats against Omar, then had consumed cable news for weeks, then had defined her public image for years. Kennedy pulled out a transcript. The paper looked different from his other documents. This one had highlighting, margin notes, sections underlined in red. March of 2019. You gave a speech in Los Angeles at a fundraising event for CARE, that's the Council on American Islamic Relations. Big ballroom at a hotel. Few hundred people in attendance. Do you remember that speech, Congresswoman? Omar nodded slowly, warily, knowing where this was going. You were talking about Muslim Americans and civil liberties. About how the Muslim American community has faced discrimination and prejudice in the years since the terrorist attacks of September 11th. Important topic. Legitimate concerns. Kennedy's voice stayed calm, but something had changed in it. Something harder underneath the honey. But you said something in that speech that troubled a lot of Americans. Including, I might add, a lot of Muslim Americans. You want to know what you said? Or should I just read it? He didn't wait for an answer. He read from the transcript, his voice slow and clear, emphasizing each word. You said, and I'm quoting directly here, CARE was founded after 9/11, which actually isn't true. CARE was founded in 1994, but we'll let that factual error slide for now, because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. Kennedy looked up from the transcript. The room was absolutely silent. Some people did something. That's how you described September 11th, 2001. The worst terrorist attack in American history. The worst attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. And you reduced it to 5 casual words. Some people did something. You could hear breathing in the room. 300 people holding their breath. Congresswoman, on September 11th, 2001, 2,977 Americans were murdered. Not killed. Murdered. By 19 Islamic terrorists who hijacked 4 commercial airplanes and deliberately flew them into buildings and crashed them into the ground with the specific intent of killing as many Americans as possible. Kennedy's voice remained steady, controlled, but there was steel underneath now. American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 500 miles per hour. 92 people on board. Everyone died. United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. 65 people on board. Everyone died. American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. 64 people on board. Everyone died. United Airlines Flight 93 passengers fought back against the hijackers. Plane crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. 44 people on board. Everyone died. He paused. Plus 2,753 people in the buildings and on the ground. Office workers. Firefighters. Police officers. Port Authority officers. Janitors. Security guards. Restaurant workers. Businessmen and businesswomen. Fathers and mothers. Sons and daughters. Brothers and sisters. Kennedy's voice got quieter but more intense. People who went to work that morning thinking it was just another Tuesday. People who kissed their families goodbye and said, "See you tonight." People who were just trying to make a living, support their families, live their lives. And they were murdered by Islamic terrorists who hijacked airplanes and used them as weapons. He set the transcript down. And you called it "Some people did something." Like it was jaywalking. Like it was a parking violation. Like it was an inconvenience. Omar tried to interrupt. "Senator, that quote is being taken completely out of context. I was making a point about how Muslim Americans lost civil liberties." "I understand context, Congresswoman." Kennedy's voice cut through hers, not louder but firmer. "I went to law school. 3 times, actually. Vanderbilt University. University of Virginia School of Law. Magdalen College at Oxford University in England. So I understand context very well. I understand nuance. I understand subtlety. I understand how words work in sentences." He picked the transcript back up. "But there's no context that makes those words acceptable. You were talking, would you describe Pearl Harbor as "some people did something"? Would you describe the Oklahoma City bombing as "some people did something"? Would you describe the Holocaust as "some people did something"? Would you describe slavery as "some people did something"? Of course not. Then why, Kennedy's voice rose slightly for the first time, why did you use those words for 9/11? Omar's voice rose defensively. "I was talking about Muslim American civil liberties, about how the community has been treated. I know what you were talking about. But you minimized. You diminished. You reduced the murder of nearly 3,000 innocent Americans to a casual, throwaway phrase. Some people did something." He leaned forward. "You know what troubles me most, Congresswoman? You didn't say terrorists did something. You didn't say murderers did something. You didn't say hijackers did something. You didn't even say Islamic extremists did something, even though that's exactly what they were, Islamic extremists who claimed to be acting in the name of Islam, who perverted and twisted a religion to justify mass murder." Kennedy's voice dropped lower. "You said some people. Anonymous. Vague. Dismissive. Like they were random folks who happened to do something unfortunate. Like it was nothing. Like it didn't matter." The silence was crushing, oppressive. 2,977 families would like you to know, Congresswoman, that it wasn't "some people did something." It was 19 Islamic terrorists who murdered their loved ones. Who murdered their fathers and mothers. Their sons and daughters. Their husbands and wives. Their brothers and sisters. He paused, let the weight of that settle. "And your words dishonor their memory." Kennedy picked up his next document before she could formulate a response. "Now let's talk about anti-Semitism." Kennedy pulled out a stack of printed tweets. The pages had that distinctive Twitter logo at the top, screenshots of social media posts with dates and timestamps clearly visible. "Congresswoman, you've been accused of anti-Semitism multiple times during your tenure in Congress. Multiple times. By members of your own party. By Jewish Democratic colleagues. By civil rights organizations. By the Anti-Defamation League. By people who wanted to support you, who wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt, but couldn't ignore your words anymore. His voice remained measured, but there was an edge to it now. You were removed from the House Foreign Affairs Committee by a vote of the full House of Representatives. That's a serious action. That doesn't happen often. Happens when someone's conduct is so problematic that their own colleagues, including members of their own party, conclude they're not fit to help shape American foreign policy. Kennedy held up the first tweet printout. February 20th, 2019. Someone asked you about support for Israel in Congress. You tweeted back, and these are your exact words, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby." With a muted note emoji. He set that one down and picked up another. When someone asked you to clarify what you meant, asked who you thought was paying these Benjamins, you responded with one word and an exclamation point. AIPAC. You were talking about the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a lobbying group that advocates for the U.S.-Israel relationship. Kennedy looked at her directly. Now, Congresswoman, that's an anti-Semitic trope, isn't it? The idea that Jews control politics through money? That politicians only support Israel because they're being paid off? That's a stereotype that's been used to justify discrimination and violence against Jewish people for literally centuries. Omar's voice rose defensively. I was criticizing a lobbying organization's influence, not Jewish people. But you invoked money specifically. The Benjamins. Cash. You suggested that support for Israel in Congress is bought and paid for. That American politicians don't genuinely support Israel based on shared values or strategic interests. No, according to you, it's all about the money. All about Jewish money buying influence. He picked up another tweet printout. March 3rd, 2019. You tweeted about, quote, the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country. You were talking about Israel again. Kennedy set it down carefully. That's another anti-Semitic trope. Dual loyalty. The idea that Jews aren't really loyal to their home countries. That they're secretly. He pulled out an official document. The House Democratic Caucus held a special meeting about your statements. According to multiple news reports, Democratic leaders told you directly that your language was fueling anti-Semitism. That Jewish members were receiving death threats. That synagogues were increasing security. That your words had consequences. Omar started to respond, but Kennedy continued. And what did you do? According to those same reports, you accused your Democratic colleagues of Islamophobia. You said they were trying to silence you because you're Muslim. You made yourself the victim instead of acknowledging the harm your words were causing to Jewish Americans. He picked up a final document, a congressional voting record. February 2nd, 2023. House Resolution 76. A vote to remove you from the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. The resolution cited your, quote, pattern of anti-Semitic comments and actions. Your own party, Congresswoman. Kennedy read from the resolution. 218 members voted to remove you, including 11 Democrats. 11 members of your own party looked at your record and concluded you shouldn't be shaping American foreign policy. He set it down with a soft thud. Were all those Democrats wrong? Were Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Jerry Nadler, all Democrats, all of whom initially wanted to support you, were they all wrong? Were the 11 Democrats who voted to remove you from committee, were they all Islamophobic? Were they all part of some conspiracy? His voice got quieter but more intense. Or were they maybe, possibly, right? Were they right that you have a problem? That you repeatedly use anti-Semitic language? That you traffic in ancient, harmful stereotypes about Jewish people? That you're not fit to represent America on matters of foreign policy? The silence stretched out. I know Jewish Americans, Congresswoman. Good people. Patriotic people. People who love this country and serve it honorably. And they're scared right now. Anti-Semitic attacks are at record highs. Synagogues need armed guards. Jewish students are afraid to wear kippahs on college campuses. Jewish families are afraid to put mezuzahs on their door frames. Kennedy's voice carried real weight now. And when they hear a member of Congress, someone with a platform, someone with influence, when they hear you using the same language that's been used to justify violence against them for thousands of years, they have every right to be concerned. They have every right to call it out. They have every right to demand accountability. He gathered the tweet printouts into a neat stack. Your own party removed you from committee because of this. That should have been a wake-up call. That should have made you stop and reflect and genuinely change. But instead, you fundraised off it. You played the victim. You learned nothing. Kennedy reached for an even thicker folder. Now let's talk about what's happening in your district right now. The biggest pandemic fraud in American history. Kennedy pulled out a Department of Justice press release. It was thick, multiple pages stapled together, with the DOJ seal prominently displayed at the top. Congresswoman, are you familiar with an organization called Feeding Our Future? Omar nodded slowly, carefully. It was a nonprofit in Minnesota that administered federal child nutrition programs. Was as the operative word there, Kennedy said. His voice had taken on a darker quality now. Let me tell you what actually happened with Feeding Our Future. He read from the DOJ press release, his voice formal and clear. Quote, in September 2022,